Some books don't ask, they confront. Ray Acheson's Abolishing State Violence does exactly that. It opens with a world on fire, the summer of 2020, streets filled with grief and rage. A moment when people refused to look away from police violence. Acheson tells us this wasn't sudden, it was a wave built on centuries of struggle, and a reminder that abolition is never born in calm times. It erupts when injustice becomes unbearable. Acheson starts with a simple idea. What if the systems that claim to protect us are the same systems that harm us? What if safety, as defined by the state, is a story told to justify control? You feel it immediately. The book doesn't soften the blow. It asks you to reconsider everything you've been taught about order, law, and security. Policing comes first because it's the front line of state power. Acheson lays it out with clarity. The people who profit from inequality are never criminalized. The people who suffer under inequality always are. The police defend the powerful, not the public. This is not a malfunction, it's the design. And once you sit with that, the rest unfolds naturally. If policing is built on violence, can it ever be reformed? Acheson suggests no. Reform is a detour, abolition is the destination. It's a hard truth, but it invites a deeper question. What would a world look like if safety didn't depend on fear? From policing, the book moves to prisons. The argument lands quickly. Prisons do not heal. They do not solve harm. They isolate people while leaving the roots of violence untouched. Acheson draws on thinkers who warned of this long ago. People who lived behind the walls themselves. People who knew that a society addicted to punishment will never know justice. You can feel the weight of that insight and the sadness that comes with accepting how much human life gets wasted inside concrete cages. Then the lens expands, surveillance enters the story, not as a distant threat, not as science fiction, but as silent architecture that shapes our daily lives. The more technology advances, the more suspicion becomes automated. Algorithms decide who is trusted and who is targeted. Entire communities are treated as risks, not people. Acheson shows how these tools migrate easily, from policing to immigration to political dissent. The violence becomes invisible, but it grows. Borders appear next, and here the tone shifts again. Borders are not just lines, they are weapons. They divide humanity into those allowed to move and those who must beg for permission. They channel enormous money into surveillance, drones, and militarized walls. The violence is profitable, and because it's profitable, it expands. The author describes borders as systems that ration life, not protect it. Once you hear that, it stays with you. War comes after that, but the book doesn't treat war as a faraway reality. It treats it as a logic, a global machine that sustains itself through fear and profit. Militarism becomes a response to every crisis, climate change, migration, inequality. Rather than address causes, states deploy violence and billions, always billions. Abolition here becomes international work, a fight against a political order that sees human life as collateral. Then comes nuclear weapons, and the tone deepens. There is no reforming a weapon that can erase a city in seconds. Abolition isn't a dream, it's survival. The author puts this plainly and firmly. It forces the listener to confront the scale of violence states are willing to maintain. But the most striking part arrives in the chapter on capitalism. Acheson describes capitalism as organized abandonment. A system that produces scarcity, then punishes people for living in it. A system that depends on policing, prisons, borders, and war to manage the inequality it creates. It's unsettling and honest. Capitalism is not separate from state violence. It's the engine. Yet, despite all this critique, the book is neither dismissive nor cynical. It moves towards something more grounded, more human. Acheson argues that abolition isn't a leap into chaos. It's already happening in tenant unions, in mutual aid groups, in community clinics, in libraries, in environmental justice movements, in the quiet, stubborn work of people who refuse to abandon one another. Most of these groups never call themselves abolitionists, but they reduce harm, they build care, they fill the void the state leaves behind. They create the world that abolition promises. The conclusion feels like a crossroads. The pandemic exposed the fractures, inequality widened, borders hardened, authoritarian politics surged, climate collapse pushed millions into danger, and fascism crawled out of the shadows again. Acheson doesn't pretend this is temporary. They argue that we are living inside overlapping crises produced by the same violent systems, and now we face a choice: accept the violence as inevitable or dismantle the structures that uphold it. Abolition, as the book frames it, is not destruction, it's construction. The building of systems rooted in care, not coercion, in collective well being, not punishment, in solidarity, not abandonment. It asks us to imagine safety not as the absence of crime, but as the presence of justice, the presence of housing, the presence of healthcare, the presence of dignity. It asks us to imagine a world where life is not managed by weapons, walls, or cages, a world where we measure safety by how well we care for each other. Acheson ends with a sentiment abolitionists have carried for generations. We have nothing to lose but our chains, and everything to gain if we dare to believe that another world is possible. Not someday, but now, in the choices we make, in the alliances we build, in the courage we bring to the work of transformation. A world beyond bombs, borders, and cages is not naive. It is necessary. And the first step towards that world is refusing to accept the violence we were taught to call normal.